Hey guys, tonight we slip past the velvet curtains of an empire and into the morning of a woman whose slippers are worth more than your entire apartment. You're not just anyone, you're a noblewoman of the Ottoman court. Outside, minarets pierce the pink dawn sky. The call to prayer floats through carved lattices, and in your silk-draped bed, you wake not with an alarm clock, but to the faint sound of slippers. Someone's already bringing your tea. Nice life. Maybe. But don't get too comfortable. You're about to spend a day in a place where power is whispered, never declared, and where one wrong look can seal your fate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always magical, seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to soft light filtering through silk curtains. They ripple slightly. Someone's cracked open the wooden shutters, just enough to let in a sliver of morning. It smells faintly of jasmine and the embers of last night's rosewood incense. A servant girl stands beside your bed holding a shallow silver tray. Her face is passive, eyes lowered, but her posture is taut. She knows one wrong move with your favorite coffee cup, and someone will be scrubbing the marble hallway with goat milk soap by noon. You sit up slowly, because this isn't the sort of life where you rush. The cushions are velvet. The bedding is embroidered by women from Bursa, whose work is considered more precious than gold in Europe. As your feet touch the floor, another servant, this one older, slides your slippers into place. Velvet, with tiny seed pearls. Absolutely impractical. You love them. Outside your chamber, the palace is beginning to hum. You can hear distant splashes in the courtyard fountain, servants shuffling down long corridors, and the sharp clack of someone getting overly dramatic with their clogs. You stretch, then rise. Time for the first ritual being seen. Not by outsiders' gods, no, but by your own circle. And believe it or not, that's sometimes even worse. You pad into your dressing room, where yet another woman, your dresser, this time awaits. She's been with you since you were 12 and knows exactly how tightly to wrap your sash when you're angry. Today, she says nothing, but you can tell from the way she arches her brow at your bedhead that you're due for some serious hair oil and combing. Ottoman beauty standards. Not forgiving. They love sleek, shiny hair, smooth skin, and that one eyebrow arch that basically says, "I could ruin you socially by lunch." As she brushes, you sip thick, cardamom-laced coffee from a cup so delicate it feels like sin to hold. Outside, the palace gardens are being raked into intricate spirals by men who are probably also reciting poetry while they do it. It's that kind of world. Here's a mainstream historical fact to drop into this sleepy haze during the height of the Ottoman Empire. Women of the imperial court had their own hierarchy, complete with titles, ranks, and even diplomatic functions. The Valid Sultan, the Sultan's mother, wielded enormous power. You're not her. Not yet. But you're definitely aiming for more than being someone's elegant footnote. And here's a quirkier tidbit. Some noblewomen train their songbirds to mimic their rivals' laughter. Supposedly, if your bird could cackle just like someone you despised, it was both hilarious and deeply passive-aggressive. You eye your own birdcage by the window, your nightingale. Layla is sadly behind on her gossip mimicry, but she's good with melodies. You finish your coffee and brace for what comes next, choosing the morning outfit. Which sounds easy until you realize it's part fashion statement, part political signal, and part armor. You settle on something in rich emerald silk, with thread of gold embroidery shaped like tulips, imperial symbols. Subtle enough to show ambition without outright saying, "I'm coming for you." Fatma. As you're dressed, corset laced, sash tied, Sleeves arranged just so you're mentally rehearsing today's conversations. You'll pass your aunt in the eastern corridor. She'll comment on your hair, which is code for you look tired. Your cousin will definitely ask you where you got your slippers. It's not curiosity, it's surveillance, as always. The tension behind the luxury is real. You live inside a building where the walls are hand-painted, the ceilings gilded, and every third person is low-key, hoping you trip socially, politically, or literally down a marble staircase. Historians still argue whether noblewomen in the Ottoman court were truly free or trapped behind beauty and etiquette. Were you respected power players or elegant prisoners in a velvet cage? You're not sure you care today. You just want your eyeliner to match on both eyes. You step into the hallway. Everything echoes the quiet click of your heels, the rustle of your sleeves. Servants bow. Another noblewoman passes by with an entourage of 2.5 maids, one's carrying a comb, the other a scandal. You nod. She nods. No one speaks. You're all playing chess on an invisible board where the pieces are compliments, glances, and strategically timed sighs. Your day has begun. And as you move toward the morning's first gathering tea, discussion, maybe a little flirtation with someone you're definitely not supposed to be looking at. You know this, your life is gorgeous, ridiculous, and constantly under surveillance. But for now, your eyeliner is perfect. And that might be all the victory you need before breakfast. You head toward the hammam, trailing embroidered silk and subtle perfume like a comet of carefully curated glamour. The bathhouse is one of your favorite escapes, and you'd never say that out loud, because noblewomen aren't supposed to have favorites. But between the marble warmth, the aromatic steam, and the illusion of privacy, the hammam is where politics gets whispered, and rivalries bubble up like rose-scented foam. It's still early. The attendants are already fanning the steam, pouring water over the central slab of marble known as the gobek tasha, the belly stone. It glistens under the domed ceiling, whose tiny glass inlays let in fragmented beams of morning light. The space is hushed, except for the splash of copper basins and the shuffle of bare feet on damp tile. You slip out of your outer layers and wrap yourself in a soft cotton peshtamal, tied just above your chest. It's still warm from the stone shelf where it was left for you, like a secret waiting to be unwrapped. You pad toward the central room and lie down, letting the heat soak through your back. Every ache, every ounce of stress and strategy seems to sweat itself out as your skin warms. This place doesn't just cleanse your body, it's where women clean their reputations. 2. Mainstream historical fact. Ottoman noblewomen frequented private hammams within their mansions or designated women-only sessions in public bathhouses. These were more than hygiene spots, they were social epicenters. It's where marriages were arranged, feuds fanned or cooled, and influence shifted beneath the veil of steam. A younger noblewoman enters, wrapped like you, cheeks flushed from the heat. She nods politely. You've heard she's recently married to a mid-ranking official. She settles across from you and begins massaging oil into her arms, glancing sideways with that blend of admiration and mild fear. You smile. Let her wonder whether you're someone to align with or someone to avoid. A servant approaches with a silver bowl of lathered zeytinyağı sabunu, olive oil soap, and begins scrubbing your arms with rhythmic, firm strokes. She'll work from limbs inward, leaving your face for last. The sensation is half exfoliation, half exorcism. You sigh. It's a good day when someone else removes your dead skin and your enemies guess wrong about your mood. Another woman enters. You recognize her immediately, Safia. She's older, with high cheekbones and eyes that have definitely read too many love letters not meant for her. Her peshtamal is red-striped, an aggressive move. Red here says I see you, and you're not ready. She makes a show of ignoring you. Classic Safia. She starts aloud. performative conversation with a friend about a nobleman who's recently returned from Persia with new tapestries and possibly, she adds with a smirk, a new wife. You don't react. You know that nobleman was your uncle. You also know his new tapestries are horrifying, but you'll let her think she's landed a blow. Historians still argue whether the Harem empowered women or served as yet another gilded cage. Was it liberation or limitation? You decide it doesn't matter today. You just know that if someone calls your peshtamal last year's weave again, you're throwing your bath sandal very gently in their direction. The servant moves on to your feet, humming softly as she scrubs. You let your head fall back against the heated stone, letting the dome blur above you. Steam curls into the corners like ghosts. Someone nearby laughs short, sharp, calculated. You don't even open your eyes. That laugh belongs to someone who desperately wants to know who's moving up and who's about to fall. Now comes the rinse warm water in copper bowls poured over your hair, your arms, your chest. There's something primal about it. Like shedding layers, not just of dirt, but of performance. For a moment, you imagine a simpler life, no scheming, no veils, no strategically selected kaftans. Just you, the water, and this heat. But then again, without the drama, what would you talk about at tea? A quirky detail worth sharing. Some noblewomen trained their servants to eavesdrop in hammams by pretending to scrub floors or polish brass fixtures. There were entire family feuds built on overheard soap-slick whispers. You once caught your maid humming a tune she only could have learned if she'd been lingering in the wrong corner. She got promoted. After one last rinse, you're guided into the cooling room, a domed space with slightly lower heat, lined with benches and bowls of dried figs, rose sherbet, and honeyed walnuts. You sip from a glass carved with floral patterns and lean back against the cushions. The younger noblewoman from earlier edges closer, clearly hoping to speak. She finally leans in and whispers, "Is it true you once refused to rise when the Valide Sultan entered the courtyard?" You raise a brow, smile faintly, and say nothing. Let rumors do your heavy lifting. Back in your chamber, your hair is wrapped in soft muslin. Your skin glows and your enemies are confused. It's the perfect way to start the day. You slip back into your silk layers with ease. There's the faintest scent of rose oil clinging to your arms, a subtle reminder that you've been somewhere where power hums under the surface of relaxation. Someone might think you spent the morning pampered, but you know better. You've survived round one. You're back in your chamber, and it's time for what should be a simple ritual, getting dressed. But of course, it's anything but. In the Ottoman court, getting dressed is performance, armor, diplomacy, seduction, and sometimes passive aggression stitched in silk. You're not just putting on clothes, you're assembling a narrative. And today's story, don't mess with me, but do compliment my cuffs. Your dresser, the same long-suffering woman who brushed out your hair this morning, is already laying out options like a general preparing for war. A green entari lined with gold bold, slightly boastful, a muted lilac one with delicate embroidery. Demure, possibly suspicious. The deep crimson kaftan you wore when your cousin fainted mid-lunch from spice fatigue, definitely too memorable. You sigh and go with midnight blue classic, regal, and just mysterious enough to make someone wonder if you know something they don't. The fabric is silk velvet, dyed with imported indigo, and lined with silver thread that catches light like moonlit water. It's also hot, heavy, and mildly itchy. Nobility has its price. Layer 1. The underdress, soft cotton, embroidered with small tulips along the collar. You slide into it as your dresser holds it open like a priestess at a silk altar. Layer 2. A short, embroidered jacket, stiff enough to make posture compulsory. You try to shrug naturally, but every movement makes you look like you're rehearsing for a painting. Layer 3 the caftan, slit at the sides, billowing with each step. The embroidery takes 3 women 4 weeks to finish, and you once spilled quince syrup on a similar one. So now everyone watches you eat like you're a toddler with a bowl of soup. Layer 4 the kushak, or sash. This one is velvet, studded with pearls. Your dresser cinches it with theatrical flair. You're now an hourglass wrapped in soft weaponry. And finally, Layer 5, the outer robe for walking the corridors, a flowing garment that signals your rank, your taste, and your general unwillingness to be bothered. Mainstream historical fact. Ottoman noblewomen's wardrobes could include dozens, sometimes hundreds of garments. Many designed not for function, but to display familial wealth, imperial favor, and taste aligned with court trends. Fabrics came from as far as Venice and India. The wardrobe was both fashion and foreign policy. You sit as your dresser begins work on your hair. Today calls for a half-up arrangement with mother-of-pearl pins and a small veil to be secured just behind your brow. The pins are sharp enough to act as weapons if needed, and in certain circles. They absolutely have. You smirk, remembering the time your aunt used hers to spear a grape in perfect silence during a deeply awkward poetry reading. Your jewelry is next. You select earrings made of hammered gold and turquoise stones, then a necklace shaped like a crescent moon. The moon here means more than beauty, it's imperial branding. You wear it like a membership badge, and a subtle threat, a quirky detail for the fashion-inclined noblewomen sometimes kept hidden compartments sewn into their sleeves. Tiny messages, perfume vials, or even powdered clove for sweetening breath during boring conversations. You once tucked a folded poem into yours, a line from Rumi, meant for no one to see but everyone to guess about. Historians still argue whether Ottoman noblewomen chose their styles freely or followed strict court-imposed trends. Some say fashion was their last domain of autonomy. Others claim it was just another layer of their gilded performance. But as you twirl slightly before the mirror, catching the shimmer of your sash in the morning light, you decide power can be woven, and you wear yours well. Your final touch slippers again? Impractical. This pair is deep plum with golden stitching and heels that make your calves look excellent, but your walk slightly treacherous on polished marble. You're going to glide. Or fall. But either way, you'll look expensive doing it as you exit your chamber, fully assembled and mildly suffocating in elegance. You pass a servant who bows deeply and announces that Lady Halime has requested your presence near the eastern fountain. This is court speak, for she wants to see what you're wearing before she decides how to feel about herself today. You nod regally, as if you didn't just spend 45 minutes debating between 3 shades of blue. You glide down the hallway, trailing a faint scent of musk and tension. Other women glance your way, some curious, some wary. No one says a word. Compliments are currency. And today, no one's making change. You arrive at the courtyard. The fountain gurgles softly. Halim is perched on a cushioned bench, already wearing an outfit that's suspiciously similar to yours in tone, but slightly more embroidered. You sit across from her and pretend not to notice. She pretends not to notice that you're pretending. The two of you sip sherbet from crystal goblets and trade comments like fencing jabs. You look refreshed, she says sweetly. Translation. I noticed you went to the hammam. Who were you trying to impress? And you look so well rested. Your turn. Translation. Was it sleep or just disinterest in your own life? The game is on. You've dressed for it. You're ready. The outfit is flawless. Your veil sits just so, and your smile is dialed to polite but possibly lethal. It's time for your lessons. Yes, even noble women have homework. But don't worry. There won't be any surprise quizzes. Just a rotating cast of tutors who think you care more about philosophy than perfume. and a lute teacher who might be in love with his own hands. You step into the study chamber, a cool, high-ceilinged room where silk curtains keep out the glare of the midday sun. There are scrolls stacked in niches, a low divan with silk cushions, and a freshly inked reed pen resting in a carved ivory holder. Everything smells of parchment, rosewater, and barely concealed boredom. Your first tutor today is an old man whose beard has more personality than he does. He begins reciting verses from the Quran, his voice low and deliberate. You respond smoothly, your memory perfect after years of repetition. You may not feel deeply spiritual at this particular hour, but you are competitive, and mispronouncing a sacred word in front of someone who reports to your grandmother is a luxury you can't afford. Mainstream historical fact time. Upper-class Ottoman girls were commonly taught to read and recite the Quran, as well as master skills like calligraphy, music, and poetry. Literacy was surprisingly high among noblewomen, especially compared to their European counterparts. You know the letters well. You also know how to hide private meanings in poetry that sound devotional, but really complain about your cousin's breath. The Quran lesson drifts into a lecture on history. Your tutor drones on about previous sultans, battles, and the empire's expansion westward. You stifle a yawn and glance toward the courtyard. A bird hops along the edge of the fountain. You wonder what it would be like to fly somewhere without permission or a chaperone. Then you remember birds get eaten by cats. Never mind. After an hour, your calligraphy teacher arrives. He's younger, with long fingers stained by ink, and a perpetually serious expression like he's always on the verge of writing something profound. He lays out a fresh sheet of paper and a pot of indigo dye. The smell of gum arabic and crushed minerals rises into the air. You grip the reed pen with practiced care. You begin writing slow, curved Arabic letters, your hand steady despite your growing restlessness. Your teacher hovers, occasionally adjusting your wrist angle. Too firm, he says softly. Let the letter breathe. You smile faintly. Maybe the letter should go for a walk. He blinks, caught off guard. 1 point for you. Your script flows across the page like lace unraveling. The letters curve into poetry, and your mind drifts again. This time, you think about a poem your cousin shared last week, an anonymous piece likely written by a noblewoman, lamenting the suffocating beauty of her surroundings. I live among tulips, yet thirst for wild flowers. You'd never admit it, but that one line rattled you for days. A quirky tidbit here, some noblewomen embedded tiny rebellious messages in their calligraphy practice. A loop just a little too sharp, a flourish that mimicked a forbidden symbol, a dot shaped like a heart. Scholars have uncovered manuscripts with subtle protest woven into divine script. You're tempted to try it today. Maybe a tiny tulip that looks just slightly like a dagger. Next comes the lute lesson. You pluck the strings with graceful detachment, trying not to wince at the discordant twang that betrays your lack of daily practice. Your teacher is more concerned with the tone than your technique. The instrument reflects your soul, he says gravely. You almost say, then my soul needs tuning, but bite your tongue. Instead, you play a slow, winding melody, fingers aching as you follow the progression he taught last week. It's strangely soothing until you catch him watching you a little too closely and purposely mess up a note. The moment shatters like dropped porcelain. Historians still argue whether these educational moments were empowering or ornamental. Were noblewomen genuinely being prepared for intellectual engagement, or simply trained to become more decorative in conversation? You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. You're educated, but only as far as it flatters the empire's reflection of itself. The lesson ends with a polite bow. You roll up your calligraphy sheet, careful not to smudge the ink, and slip it into a drawer lined with rose petals. Not for preservation, just to keep the scent from being ruined by the ink. Everything here smells like a garden. Even failed metaphors. You return to your chamber briefly before lunch. Thoughts buzzing. It's hard not to feel like each lesson is a performance. You don't learn because you're free. You learn because you're watched. Because cleverness, in the right dose, makes you desirable, and in the wrong dose, dangerous. You sit at your writing desk and uncork your favorite ink pomegranate red, nearly black on the page. You write a quick poem in the margins of your lesson notes. Her veil was stitched from secrets shared, her tongue. Her petal's quiet blade, she sat, and silence dared not stay. For even stillness knew her name. You sign it with nothing. Anonymity feels like armor, too. Lunch is over. The sherbet was tart, the lamb perfect, and someone's comment about your cousin's embroidery caused a barely contained scandal that will absolutely reappear at tonight's gathering. You return to the shaded courtyard, where the marble tiles are cool beneath your slippers and perched near the fountain, not just to relax, but to be seen relaxing. This, after all, is the hour of soft diplomacy. You've barely arranged your skirts when your aunt appears, gliding toward you with a smile just a touch too wide. Behind her trail, two younger women, one her niece, the other some ambitious daughter of a recently promoted vizier. The air thickens instantly. This isn't tea. This is political theater, mainstream historical fact, Ottoman noblewomen, especially those in the imperial court or tied to powerful families, often played crucial but unofficial political roles. Through marriages, correspondence, and court alliances, their influence rippled through the empire, usually out of sight, but never out of reach. A well-placed word here could affect policy. A raised eyebrow could make or break a suitor's chances. Your aunt sits beside you, arranging her robes as if unfurling a flag. You heard about the appointment in Anatolia, she asks. Eyes glinting, she's fishing. You nod faintly. Distant provinces, always full of surprises and scorpions. The younger niece giggles nervously. The vizier's daughter doesn't laugh. Smart girl. A servant appears with a silver tray of tea and candied fruits. You select a single cube of quince, letting it dissolve slowly on your tongue. The quiet pause that follows is strategic. You're giving them a moment to wonder if your silence means knowledge or boredom. It's both, actually. The conversation swirls around you, a comment on a certain pasha's deteriorating health, an accidental mention of a daughter soon to be of marriageable age, subtle digs at a rival noblewoman's taste in rugs because, apparently, owning a carpet from the wrong weaver is social death. You nod occasionally, smile just enough, and drop one carefully sharpened comment. Oh, I thought she'd retired from decorating entirely. So brave to keep trying. The vizier's daughter bites her lip. Your aunt arches an eyebrow. Checkmate. Not yet, but the board is shifting. A quirky detail you enjoy in elite Ottoman circles. Women often used allegorical stories, animal fables, folk tales, even fictional letters to talk politics without ever saying a name. You once sat through a 10-minute parable about a fox, a melon, and a rainstorm that somehow managed to insult 3 people, recommend a marriage, and suggest a servant was spying for Venice. Masterful stuff. As the sun climbs higher, the conversation drifts toward the topic of an upcoming festival. The Sheker Bayrama celebration is nearing, and the palace will be awash in sweets, lanterns, and, more importantly, guests. Everyone wants to know who will attend, who will not, and who will pretend not to notice either way. Your aunt glances at you. I imagine you'll wear something subtle, she says sweetly. You smile, as subtle as a thunderclap in brocade. Historians still argue whether noblewomen like you truly had power, or simply operated in the shadows of men who officially ruled. But the Empire knew better. These courtyards, salons, and gardens were the soft lungs of the palace here. Power inhaled and exhaled on whispers, glances, and questions asked twice. The vizier's daughter finally gathers the courage to speak. "I've heard your cousin might be invited to the gathering with the French ambassador." You raise your brows, just a touch. She does love the sound of French. A pause. Even when it's incorrect, the girl blinks. A smile flickers at your aunt's lips. You know they'll repeat that line. Maybe twist it. You intended that. Later, alone again near the fountain, you stretch your fingers and trace a slow circle along the cool stone rim. A breeze stirs the jasmine vines. You reflect for a moment how easy it is to forget you haven't left the palace walls in months. How your world is both vast and confined. How diplomacy feels like embroidery, beautiful, painstaking, and mostly unseen by those who aren't looking for it. A servant clears her throat discreetly. "A message." "Hanım Efendi," she says. She places a folded note beside your cushion and departs as quietly as she came. You open it. Just a line of poetry. Unsigned, "Let the fountain murmur what the lips must never say." You smile. It's a compliment, or a warning, possibly both. That's politics. You rise gracefully, already thinking of your next move. You might write a poem. You might send a flower to someone whose name you're not supposed to know. You might compliment the vizier's daughter tomorrow, just enough to confuse her, never enough to reassure her. And so, with robes swirling and secrets blooming like tulips in your mind, you head back toward your chamber. Another round of tea, another whisper, another tiny rearrangement of power. Just another afternoon in your velvet-lined world. The scent hits you before you even reach the dining chamber sumac. Saffron, cinnamon, and something that might be roasted pomegranate. The palace kitchens are working overtime, as they always do. And while you don't technically need a meal with 15 courses, you've learned that refusing one causes more tension than swallowing the fourth lamb skewer of the afternoon. You enter the small formal dining room used for women of your rank. There are no long banquet tables. This is an Ottoman affair, and meals are taken seated on low cushions around circular trays set on short-legged tables. You sink gracefully into your spot, careful not to let your robes bunch under you. Every fold is rehearsed. Every reach for a dish is choreography. A silver ewer of rosewater is passed around. You cup your hands as it's poured over them, the cool scent clinging to your skin like a memory you don't own. Then comes the basin of perfumed steam to refresh your face. Clean hands. Serene expression, ready for food and diplomacy. Mainstream historical fact, Ottoman court cuisine was famously elaborate, blending Central Asian, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean flavors. The Topkapi Palace kitchen complex employed over 1,000 people at its peak, including chefs who specialized in just one ingredient. Imagine being the rice guy for your entire life. Meals were designed not just for nourishment, but to showcase imperial refinement. The first course arrives a simple lentil soup, thick and spiced just enough to make your lips tingle. A servant ladles it into shallow porcelain bowls with gold-rimmed edges. You dip your spoon and take the first sip. It's perfect. Unfortunately, that means everyone else is going to pretend theirs isn't. To your left, a girl scrunches her nose delicately and whispers, "A bit heavy on the cumin." You glance over and nod as if in agreement. You don't care, but the game is ongoing. Next comes stuffed grape leaves, yaprak sarma, delicate, rolled with rice, pine nuts, and just enough dried currants to make you wonder how many fingers wrapped each one. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, as if you're weighing a serious decision. In truth, you're just trying not to eat the entire plate before the third course. A servant, young, wide-eyed, nervous, approaches with a tray of skewered lamb and dried apricots. She's new. Her hands shake slightly as she serves you. You offer her a small smile. Kindness, even when performative, is noticed. Beside you, Lady Halime lifts a spoonful of eggplant stew and says, "My cook roasts it longer, gives it a deeper flavor. She's testing you." You nod slowly. Ah, but does she whisper poetry to it while it roasts? A pause. A few women chuckle. You win this round. Quirky tidbit for the culinary. Curious Ottoman noble kitchens occasionally used edible gold leaf for desserts served during major festivals. More bizarrely, one record suggests the Sultan once requested silvered plums to test the loyalty of his kitchen staff, because nothing says trust exercise like glittering fruit. The rice pilaf arrives next, studded with almonds and barberries. It's fluffy, fragrant, and nearly impossible to eat without accidentally dropping a grain or two. You manage 5 spoonfuls before a single grain lands on your silk. A servant rushes in silently and lifts it away with a cloth like it's a venomous insect. The drama of the grain. Exhausting. Dessert is layered first candied quince, then locum Turkish, delight in pale rose and pistachio. You choose only one, because choosing 2 makes people ask questions. The trick is always to seem restrained while secretly memorizing where the best sweets are hidden. As you sip the final cup of tea, strong, black, and almost bracing you, let your gaze drift across the table. The women here are chatting, smiling, praising the mint sauce a little too specifically. All of it looks relaxed. None of it is. Beneath every compliment is a calculation. Every silence is a potential story. You're all diplomats in embroidered sleeves. Historians still argue whether these meals were moments of relaxation or coded battlegrounds. The official record calls them communal time, but you know better. The kitchen may serve the food, but reputation is what gets devoured. After the meal, you linger just long enough to avoid seeming eager to leave. One woman compliments your bracelet. Another says, "That color suits your eyes." You murmur something in response that could either be a thank you or a warning. It's more fun when they're not sure. You rise slowly, bow slightly, and turn to go. On the way out, you catch the eye of the kitchen girl again. Her face is pale. She's carrying a tray of uneaten stuffed dates and trying not to drop it. You give her a subtle nod. Maybe tonight, you'll have your own plate of stuffed dates sent to your chamber. Maybe you'll eat them while composing a letter to a cousin you pretend to like. Maybe you'll give some to your bird and see if Layla can learn to mimic Halimi's voice. Stranger things have happened in this palace. You return to your quarters full, but not just with food, with impressions, observations, the shape of a compliment you plan to weaponize tomorrow, and the lingering taste of saffron on your tongue. Every bite, every word, every blink over a porcelain cup was part of the unspoken feast. And you didn't just eat, you hosted. You've shed your formal robes like a second skin and now move through your private quarters in lighter garments, still silk. Of course, because cotton is for people who sleep without worries. This is your hour of quiet, though quiet in the Ottoman court rarely means silence. It means no one is openly trying to destroy you. You settle at your writing desk, fingers tracing the carved wood where you've scribbled dozens of letters, some real, some decoys, some designed entirely for mischief. The inkpots are arranged in a semicircle, black for tradition, blue for diplomacy, red for passion, gold for deception. Today, you reach for the sapphire ink. It glints like a secret, because here's the truth for Ottoman noblewomen. Writing letters wasn't just communication, it was strategy. You've written more influence into a single page than some men managed in a year of shouting. And when you seal your message with wax in a pressed tulip, it travels like a whisper dressed in silk, mainstream historical fact. Ottoman noblewomen often communicated via letters written in Ottoman Turkish, Arabic, or Persian, sometimes all three within the same document. These letters weren't just personal. They were political tools. Some noblewomen even maintained coded correspondence with foreign courts, using metaphors so dense you'd need a linguist and a matchmaker to decode them. Today, your message is simple. A thank you note to the wife of a regional governor who recently sent you a bolt of silk and, according to rumor, a servant trained to listen through lattice screens. You compliment the gift, vaguely reference the fabric's surprisingly receptive texture, and mention a proverb about foxes in vineyards. She'll know what you mean, or she won't. Either outcome works in your favor. You fold the note, seal it with your signet, an intricate tulip wrapped in moonlight, and hand it to your servant. Send it now, you say, and tell the messenger to take the slow path. Delayed delivery can be more telling than promptness. You're not just sending a letter, you're sending a pause. Next, your jewelry box. Not for wearing, just for looking. You open it like a reliquary, velvet-lined, packed with gleaming proof that taste and power can sit quietly side by side. There's the emerald ring from your grandmother, rumored to have been stolen from a Muggle court. The crescent moon earrings you wore the day a rival tripped on her own robes. And your favorite, an opal pendant that seems to change color depending on who's looking. Quirky tidbit. Some noblewomen hid coded messages in their jewelry. One popular motif, a tulip with slightly mismatched petals, was used to signal discontent to those who knew how to read it. Another involved pearls, arranged to mimic the constellation under which a secret meeting had occurred. You once wore a brooch that matched the embroidered cuffs of a visiting Venetian ambassador's wife. She noticed. Her husband didn't. You had a great week. Now, you switch gears. Time for a bit of needlework. Not because you need to mend anything, you have people for that, but because every noblewoman is expected to know how to embroider like she's recording history in thread. You take up your hoop, find your silver needle, and begin stitching a motif of pomegranates and stars into the edge of a handkerchief. As the thread moves through silk, you let your mind drift. Needlework is one of the few courtly tasks that lets your hands work while your thoughts wander. You consider a recent rumor something about a letter that never arrived, a servant who mysteriously vanished, and a prince who might be visiting the palace incognito. Probably false, possibly not. Either way, it gives your day texture. Historians still argue whether noblewomen's creative outlets, embroidery, poetry, music were genuine expressions or carefully curated masks. Were you artists or instruments of display? You suspect it depends on who's watching. In this quiet hour, you feel like both. You pause to examine your stitching. One star is crooked. You leave it. Let someone find it and wonder if it's a symbol. Maybe it is. Maybe it means I know what you did. Or maybe you just sneezed while sewing. Let them guess. The sun slants lower across your marble floor, stretching golden light toward your toes. You rise, stretch, and walk to the lattice window. Outside, the gardens sway gently. You spot your nightingale in her cage, feathers puffed in contentment. You hum a tune, one you learned in childhood. Something simple, and she answers with a trill. Still not quite Halime's laugh, but getting closer. A servant knocks softly. Would you like your shawl now? Hanım Efendi. The air is cooling. You nod. She drapes a gossamer shawl over your shoulders. The fabric's so light it barely registers on your skin. You think about wearing it to tea later, subtle enough to seem accidental, sheer enough to remind anyone watching that you haven't aged a day since the last scandal. As evening approaches, you roll up your embroidery, cap your ink, and close the jewelry box with a satisfying click. You've spent the last hour not just relaxing, but reinforcing your image. Every thread, every jewel, every sentence folded into a note, all of it a chess move. And no one saw your hands on the board. Now, let them wonder what you've been doing. Let them talk. You've written nothing and everything. Evening slides over the palace like silk over polished marble. Shadows grow long in the colonnades, and lanterns begin to flicker to life, their glass shells catching warm hues of amber and rose. This is when the palace starts to breathe differently, quieter, slower, but not any less watchful. You walk the garden paths now, flanked by lemon trees and clipped myrtle hedges, your shawl trailing behind like a whispered rumor. This is the golden hour, not just for light, but for maneuvering, for being seen walking alone, but not too alone, for pretending to reflect deeply while listening with the casual intensity of a hunter in velvet slippers. Tonight, there's a poetry reading in the garden pavilion, hosted by your aunt, or maybe your cousin, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's happening, and therefore not attending would mean something. So here you are, moving like water toward it, heart calm, ears sharp. Mainstream historical fact poetry was central to Ottoman culture, especially among the elite. Both men and women composed, memorized, and recited verse as a means of expressing identity, emotion, loyalty, and, more dangerously, dissent. Ottoman women's poetry, often signed anonymously or with pseudonyms, used metaphor and nature imagery to veil surprisingly bold thoughts. You arrive and take your seat on embroidered cushions beneath a lattice awning. Oil lamps flicker above, releasing hints of orange blossom. The garden smells alive, damp soil, crushed mint, and the faint sweetness of ripe figs. A fountain murmurs nearby, like it's heard everything and is pretending not to judge. The first poem is long and somber. It references dying leaves, a fading moon, and a silence louder than drums. You sip pomegranate sherbet and try not to roll your eyes. The poet is a son of someone important, and therefore you must pretend to be moved. You nod, slowly, like someone absorbing philosophical truths instead of counting the number of metaphors about dust. A young woman takes the floor next. Her voice is soft but confident. She's new, unfamiliar perhaps, visiting from Edirne or sent by a relative to see how courtly air affects the lungs. Her poem is sharp beneath its floral facade. They caged the rose behind silk walls and fed it moonlight soaked in rules. Yet still, it bloomed between the cracks, and thorns were taught to smile. You feel a quiet stir ripple through the audience. It's bold, not in volume, but in implication. You raise your teacup slightly in her direction. She notices. She bows her head. That's how alliances are born here, not with contracts, but with careful compliments disguised as curiosity, a quirky detail. Sometimes, noblewomen would pass handwritten verses during these events, slipping folded papers into fruit bowls or beneath carpets to be retrieved later. You once found a line hidden inside a peach, better to bruise than never ripen. You didn't eat the peach. You did keep the note. Someone begins playing the ney, that reed flute so mournful it could make a stone sigh. Its sound curls into the night air, a single unbroken thread of longing. For a moment, even the gossips pause. This is why poetry survives here, because in a world of strict protocol and veiled threats, words still escape. Historians still argue whether women's poetry in the Ottoman Empire had real political weight or simply functioned as private expression. Some claim it offered a rare outlet for emotional honesty. Others suggest it disguised critiques of empire, patriarchy, or even the Sultan himself. You think the most dangerous poem is the one that lets people believe it's harmless. The program ends with a recitation of a well-known classic, delivered by your ever-ambitious cousin. Her voice is theatrical, her vowels stretched like fabric too long left in the sun. She gestures with one hand, twice nearly knocking over her own teacup, and finishes with a smile too wide to be sincere. Applause follows. You clap just enough. She catches your eye and smiles the way cats do before knocking something off a shelf. You sip the last of your sherbet. It tastes like pomegranate and mild resentment. As the gathering dissolves, women drift into smaller groups, some praising the flute player, others dissecting metaphors. One loudly asking whether the rose in that earlier poem referred to someone present. You walk alone for a few moments, letting your thoughts breathe. You find a bench near the jasmine trellis and sit. The breeze carries the smell of orange peel and night flowers. For a moment, you almost feel unobserved. Almost. Then you hear footsteps, deliberate, soft. Someone is coming. A voice you know deep, warm, and far too comfortable with dramatic pauses says, "I didn't expect you to enjoy that final verse." You glance up. It's the court musician. He's bold, which is rarely smart, but sometimes useful. You arch a brow. "Did you expect me to compose a reply on the spot?" He smiles. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." You don't answer. Instead, you recite softly. The moon has eyes that see the sun, but shines for those who never ask. He bows his head. "Ah. So it was about someone present." You rise. "All poems are." Eventually, you walk away before he can reply. Because that's how you win these exchanges, not with volume, but with well-timed exits and the faintest scent of mystery in your wake. Night has thickened like velvet pulled across the sky. The lanterns have been lit, casting a soft golden glow across the marble floors and filigreed screens. The palace no longer buzzes. It murmurs. Conversations shift lower. Footsteps slow, and behind every curtain, someone listens. This is the hour when the palace becomes truly itself. No grand ceremonies, no stiff lessons, no silver trays piled high, just shadows, secrets, and silk slippers moving quietly across cool stone. You return to your chambers, but you do not sleep. Not yet. There's something about the night that stirs your mind. You sit on the cushioned sill of your window, staring out past the garden into the low hills beyond. You've lived in this world of roses and restraint long enough to know when silence is just noise turned inside out. You hear a faint knock. 3 short taps, then 1 long. It's not a mistake, it's a signal. Mainstream historical fact. Even in the heavily supervised world of the Ottoman elite, there were ways to send and receive secret messages. Trusted servants, shared poetry references, scent markers in letters. Noblewomen were experts at cloaking meaning in formality. Some even developed their own codes, trading rumors or coordinating alliances with a complexity that would shame most diplomats. You rise and open the small side door of your chamber. There's no one visible but at your feet. Folded precisely, lies a piece of cloth embroidered with a single word. Bekle. Wait. You pick it up. That's it. No name, no detail. And yet, it hums with meaning. You place the cloth in a lacquered box beneath your bed. This isn't the first time you've received such a note, and it won't be the last. Wait could mean hours, days, weeks. It could be a warning, a command, or an invitation. You won't ask. You'll just watch. Historians still argue whether palace women were truly involved in political plots or simply caught up in the storytelling that surrounded them. You wonder if it matters. Does it count as a conspiracy if all you did was breathe in the right direction and someone else fell? You wash your hands slowly in rose-scented water. The bowl is carved with peacocks, their tails curling into infinity. You trace one with your finger. It reminds you of the story your grandmother told that peacocks don't sing unless no one is listening. She said that's why they're dangerous. You light a single candle near your bed and sit before it, watching the flame flicker. It's strange how something so small can erase so much shadow. You wonder if anyone's doing the same across the courtyard. Maybe Halim. Maybe someone who sent that embroidered message. Maybe a friend. Maybe not. A quirky detail. Since your mind is busy cataloging them tonight, some women in the harem used scent trails as messages. A handkerchief laced with jasmine meant meet me. Sandalwood meant stay quiet. Clove meant danger. One time, someone left you a vial of ambergris wrapped in silk. You still don't know if it was a love letter or a threat. Maybe both. You rise and pull open the carved panel near your bed, a hidden alcove, known only to you and one other person whom you haven't seen in nearly a year. Inside are 4 things: an old inkpot, a worn poetry collection with pressed violets inside, a tiny pair of scissors, and a map. The map is nothing dangerous, just a sketch of the palace gardens, with no markings. But you know every curve of the paths. You drew it when you were 12 and dreaming of escape routes. Now, you don't dream of escaping. You dream of staying exactly where you are, just sharper, wiser, ahead. You return to your window and let the air cool your cheeks. Below, the garden is mostly empty. A cat slinks across the path, pausing to sniff a low bush. A lantern flickers twice in the west wing, then steadies. You note it, just in case it means something tomorrow. You let your mind drift. Tomorrow there will be tea, and questions dressed as compliments. There will be a servant who speaks too carefully, and a dress that fits a little too well to be accidental. Someone will try to charm you. Someone else will fail at it. And tonight you do nothing. Doing nothing is an art. It's resistance, dressed in quiet. It's power, braided into stillness. It's what noblewomen like you have learned to master. You've survived on secrets and silk, on poetry and silence. You've shaped outcomes just by being underestimated. Now you pull the curtains closed, not to hide, but to choose who sees you next. The candle burns low. You blow it out in one breath, and you wait. The morning begins with the faintest rustle of satin and a whisper of footsteps, your chambermaids moving like ghosts, trained to enter without waking you. And yet, somehow, they always do. You lie still beneath the silk sheets, listening to the sounds of water being poured, fabric being folded, drawers opening and closing with the soft precision of ritual. Another day begins. Another performance is set to start. You open your eyes and sit up, not because you want to, but because staying still is never an option for too long. The empire runs on motion, yours included. Today is not an ordinary day. There's a rumor delivered last night in the form of a misplaced ribbon tied around your teacup that a foreign delegation is arriving. Not to the harem, of course, but to the outer court. Still, these things ripple inward, and when they do, they change the current, mainstream historical fact. While Ottoman noblewomen didn't directly participate in diplomatic events, they were often deeply involved behind the scenes. Alliances were cemented or unraveled based on how a woman's family responded to political shifts. Gifts, letters, even the colors worn at the right moment could serve as statements of alignment or disapproval. You rise and step into the bathing room, where warm water scented with mint and rose is already waiting in the marble basin. Your attendant pours it gently over your arms and back. The steam rises, softening the air, clouding the edges of the gilded tiles. You lean into it, letting the warmth lull you for a moment into the illusion of peace. Your thoughts are already calculating if the French ambassador's wife is here. What jewelry will she wear? Will she bring letters? Will Halime accidentally leave her fan near the guest suite again? Hoping for gossip, will your cousin pretend not to care, while secretly preparing a tray of candied violets that she claims are always around? After the bath comes the garment debate again. Not just any outfit will do. This morning requires subtle influence. You choose soft gray silk, neither meek nor arrogant, with a pattern of faint cypress trees woven into the hem. Cypress means endurance. Anyone who recognizes that deserves to be treated carefully. You fasten your brooch, 2 overlapping tulips in ivory and silver. It's an old piece, quiet in its elegance, which makes it more powerful than anything sparkly. As always, you consider what it says. I remember who gave this to me. I remember everything. In the courtyard. The garden paths have been swept and fresh water placed in the fountains. There's a flutter in the air, not wind, not nerves, but something like anticipation. A group of younger women sits under the shade of a plane tree, giggling too loudly. They're rehearsing admiration for whoever may arrive. You keep walking. At the far end of the harem lies the Valley des Sultans salon. You pause outside, pretending to admire a mosaic, while you listen. The voices within are hushed but sharp-edged. You catch phrases like too many spices, never on time, and blue is too aggressive. It's enough to confirm the delegation is arriving, and their timing, likely deliberate, is already offending someone important. You smile faintly. It's going to be a good day. Quirky tidbit. Ottoman noblewomen sometimes exchanged unofficial gifts with foreign visitors, usually something innocuous, like embroidery or perfume soap. But some would embed messages in the weave, or add subtle patterns as coded greetings. One woman allegedly gifted a Venetian ambassador's wife a handkerchief with a rose stitched inside a closed gate, interpreted as both a welcome and a warning. Depends who you ask. Historians still argue whether these coded exchanges carried political weight or were merely a woman's way of feeling included in statecraft. But you've seen how one misunderstood flower can sour a marriage proposal. If that's not diplomacy, what is? You return to your quarters and settle into your writing space again. You select paper so thin it might float if dropped, and dip your pen in ink the color of dusk. You write slowly, deliberately. He wore the sun, but did not warm. He came with salt, but gave no flavor. Still, we smiled. We always do. You fold it and place it in your collection, not to send, not yet. Just to have, to remind yourself that words can outlast the empire, as the hour nears when the foreign guests are expected to pass through the outer courtyard. You drift to a shaded veranda where you can watch without seeming to watch. You sit with a bowl of sugared almonds and a book open on your lap. Though you're not reading, you're studying movements. Who emerges from the palace, who lingers too long, who rushes to deliver news before it cools. A servant hurries by, bearing an embroidered pouch, most likely a gift. Another trails after, carrying a tray of glass flasks containing rose syrup, cinnamon water, and a small vial of Is that ambergris risky? Decadent? Possibly an overstep? You feel someone approaching and glance sideways. It's the vizier's daughter. She seats herself delicately beside you. They say the ambassador's wife has brought silk from Lyon. She murmurs, I wonder if it's real. You smile over your almonds. I wonder if she's real. I've yet to see anyone who's charmed 3 provinces with a hemline. She laughs, the soft, surprised kind. You file that away for later. That laugh might be useful, as the sun begins its long descent and the air shifts toward gold again. You remain exactly where you are, not in the main court, not in the guest salon, but just within earshot, just visible enough to be remembered, because in this empire, presence is power. And sometimes the most powerful woman is the one who chooses not to be the first voice heard. Twilight melts over the palace like a second skin cooler, quieter, but just as carefully tailored. This is the time when your world tilts from public performance to private precision. The delegation is gone now, their carriage wheels having whispered over the stones like a secret, and yet the aftershock lingers in your corridors. You haven't spoken to them. Of course. That would be improper. but the scent of their visit is everywhere: the citrus oil they wore, the peculiar leather of their gloves, the way their words folded through your world like smoke in satin. You didn't see them, but they saw the trail you left the embroidered towel by the fountain, the teacup accidentally left with a poem scrawled inside its saucer. A game of shadows, yes, but one you've been winning since girlhood. Now, back in your chambers, you recline on a divan as a servant brushes out your hair. You don't speak. You let the scent of clove oil and crushed rosemary lull your senses as your hair, dark and heavy, is pulled into long, slow strokes. The hush is sacred, something between prayer and plotting. Mainstream historical fact: hair care was an elaborate ritual for Ottoman noblewomen. Oils, ointments, and scented rinses were not only used for beauty, but as social indicators. Certain scents were associated with particular families, regions, or even political leanings. A whiff of rose and musk might say old money. Amber and sandalwood ambition with a French tutor. You dismiss the servant with a quiet nod. She leaves without a word, as trained. Alone now, you rise and move toward your mirrored armoire. Inside hangs your nighttime robe, quilted silk, indigo with silver detailing, worn soft from years of quiet power moves. You slip into it slowly. You don't rush this moment, because tonight you're receiving someone. No, not romantically. Don't flatter them. This is strategic intimacy, a quiet exchange of stories, perhaps a reading of poetry. But every line will be a test, every pause, a possible pivot. They say men go to war with swords, women with syllables. You sit beside a low table where the night sweets have been placed: halva, candied melon, pistachios roasted in honey. You nibble idly, choosing what won't leave crumbs or ruin your breath. Practical elegance. Then another soft knock. A servant steps in, bows, and announces Halime Hanım wishes to visit, if you are available. Of course she does. You raise a brow. Let her in. Moments later, Halime swans into the room. She's wrapped in crimson silk, and her eyes sparkle with a little too much pleasure. You already know what this is. She wants to debrief and maybe declare victory. Did you see her? She says, sinking into the cushion across from you. See who? The ambassador's wife. They say she wore pearls in her braid. Pearls in this humidity. You smile faintly. A bold strategy. Let's hope her scalp forgives her. She laughs, too loudly. She's nervous. She did something. Quirky tidbit among Ottoman noblewomen. Mockery was a refined art, one never insulted directly. You used scent, color, poetry, even food as your weapons. Sending someone a tray of overly salted pistachios was a subtle but savage way of implying she had overstepped. Halime launches into a long tale about how her tray of sweets was coincidentally delivered just as the ambassador's wife passed through. I do hope she enjoyed the walnut cookies, she says, sipping her tea. You tilt your head. She's French, isn't she? Yes. Then perhaps next time send her something she understands. She blinks. Silence. Then you always did have a sharper tongue than me. Not sharper, just quieter. Historians still argue whether relationships between noblewomen in the palace were genuinely affectionate or entirely competitive. The truth, you live in a palace built on both. Love and rivalry bloom in the same courtyard. Sometimes they wear the same dress. You steer the conversation toward poetry. Halime shares a new verse she's written. It's overwrought, but technically competent. You praise her metaphor about the moon bathing in regret and conveniently ignore the stanza that clearly alludes to your recent embroidery work. As she recites, you study her, her tone, her pacing, the way her fingers pick at the edge of her robe. She wants something, probably an introduction or a letter delivered. You file that information away. Later, it may be worth granting, or withholding. Eventually, Halime takes her leave with a dramatic sweep of her scarf and a promise to bring roses next time. You murmur, only if they haven't already wilted. Alone again, you return to your divan and press your fingers together. The room is still, but your thoughts are not. You've avoided direct conflict today. You've said almost nothing of substance, and yet the delegation will report your elegance. The kitchen staff will whisper that your robe glowed in the candlelight. Halime will spend hours decoding your expressions. All of this, and you haven't moved a single chess piece. That's because you are the board. And you've learned something new tonight, not about politics, but about restraint, and how sometimes the softest presence makes the loudest echo. The moon is high, a pale coin pressed into indigo velvet, and the palace has grown quiet in the way that means truly quiet. Not just hushed voices and dimmed lanterns, but that eerie stillness when even the birds stop whispering. A good Ottoman noblewoman knows this is the hour when truth begins to peel away from performance. You lie on your divan, wide awake, wrapped in your evening robe. The embroidery along your sleeves, tiny blossoms of silver thread, glints faintly in the candlelight. You aren't waiting for anything, but you are ready. Outside your chamber, the marble floors creak ever so slightly. A servant passes, then another, too quickly, then silence again. You rise, barefoot, and glide across the room to your private chest. You lift the lid and retrieve the pouch hidden beneath your prayer scarf. Inside it, 2 folded letters, 1 real, 1 decoy, a coral pendant, a tiny dried flower, and the old sketch of the western garden wall still marked with the faintest charcoal cross. You don't need it anymore, but you like knowing it's there. Mainstream historical fact, some Ottoman noblewomen, especially those in the palace, maintained their own networks of servants and confidants, often shared with other women, sometimes inherited from older relatives. These networks were used not just for comfort, but for information: who arrived when, what they wore, what they said when they thought no one was listening. You hear it, a second knock, soft, hesitant. 4 taps, not the earlier rhythm. This one is unexpected. You don't answer immediately. Instead, you let the knock hang there, unanswered, suspended in the space between questions and permission. When you finally approach, you open the panel slowly, revealing a different servant. She's new. You barely recognize her. She bows. A note. Hanım Efendi, from the seamstress. Odd. The seamstress shouldn't be writing at this hour, and certainly not to you. You take the paper, unfold it, and scan the elegant but rushed handwriting. It's not from the seamstress. Of course not. The thread was cut before the hem was sealed. Someone is stitching faster than they should. You inhale once, slowly. A threat, a warning, a clue. You burn the note immediately, watching the flame consume it without flinching. Then you look out the window at the dark garden beyond. Someone's maneuvering tonight, or tomorrow. You'll find out. You always do. Quirky tidbit. Palace intrigue sometimes included women using the language of sewing as code. Dropped stitch meant betrayal. Unraveled edge was used for scandal. Seam too tight meant alliances were getting too close. You once heard someone say a friendship was loosening like old thread the next week. That friend left the palace permanently. You return to your divan and pour yourself a tiny cup of Turekotu tea, black cumin seed, sharp and earthy. It clears your head. You take slow sips and think about your cousin's sudden silence, the ambassador's wife's pearls, and Halime's insistence on roses. Something is unraveling, but you are not afraid. Historians still argue whether noblewomen in the Ottoman Empire participated directly in palace plots or simply reacted to them. But you've lived long enough inside these walls to know reaction is participation. And sometimes Not stopping something is the same as pushing it forward. You spend the next hour writing, not letters, not poetry, just notes, names, events, patterns. You keep a ledger of memory, not because you're forgetful, but because clarity requires structure. Your handwriting is steady, even elegant, as you list the subtle shifts of the day who arrived, who stared too long, who didn't speak when they should have. You underline ambassador's wife. No veil. Twice. Eventually, you close the notebook, seal it inside its silk case, and tuck it into the wall panel behind your mirror. Another quiet chess piece placed on the board. And then, at last, you prepare for sleep. You slip into bed, beneath a quilt of pale damask, and exhale fully. The pillows smell faintly of lavender and something else perhaps, basil from the nearby gardens. It grounds you, but before you close your eyes, you say the short prayer your mother taught you. Not the formal one, the other one. The one that goes, "Let my tongue be velvet, my eyes be glass, my steps be snow, and my thoughts be fire beneath." You whisper it like a lullaby. It isn't in any official text, but in this palace, unofficial things last longest. You drift off not because you're tired, but because you've seen enough of the day, and you'll need your strength for whatever story tomorrow tries to tell. Because stories lie. But you always read between the stitches. You wake before the light touches the domes. There's a stillness that only exists at this hour, before footsteps begin, before the scent of brewing coffee, before the air warms enough to carry whispers. In this slice of the morning, the palace belongs to you. You rise quietly and slip into your walking shoes, soft, embroidered slippers with soles nearly silent against the marble. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, not for warmth, but to remind any early risers that even before dawn, you remain composed. A woman's silhouette in the early light must never look undone. Even her shadow should hold dignity. Your destination, the inner courtyard garden, mainstream historical fact. Ottoman noblewomen of high rank often had early access to the private gardens, meticulously maintained spaces of roses, citrus trees, marble fountains, and shaded alcoves. These weren't just for pleasure. They were sanctuaries where alliances formed. Lessons were taught, and secrets like seeds were planted. The grass is damp beneath the tiny paths of stone, dew clinging like lace to your hems. A breeze stirs the fig leaves, and above you, birds begin their morning arguments with gentle, persistent song. You stroll slowly, past the mosaic-tiled pool and the latticed trellises where climbing jasmine has begun to overreach. A gardener bows silently as you pass. You stop beside the fountain with the 3 lions. Their mouths pour a steady stream of water, murmuring like old men who know too much. You seat yourself on the cool marble edge and breathe. Then you hear it, a voice soft, familiar, half singing, drifting through the hedge. You recognize it instantly. Layla, the servant girl who hums lullabies meant for babies but sings them to her herbs. You smile. Quirky tidbit. Some palace women, especially younger attendants, secretly cultivated personal gardens within the main 1 tiny herb patches hidden behind rose beds or within decorative urns. They used them for remedies, perfume ingredients, and, occasionally, coded messages spelled in which herbs bloom together. A pot of basil and rosemary meant come tonight. A single marjoram sprig. Someone is watching. You call to Layla. She startles, peeking around the bush with wide eyes and dirt-smudged fingers. Hanım Efendi, I didn't know you. It's fine. You say, you're early. She scrambles up, bows, then offers a sprig of mint. For your tea. You accept it and pause. You heard anything this morning? She hesitates. Only that the sweets from last night are still being discussed. Good. Let them chew on that instead of me. She giggles and hurries off, probably to finish hiding a time plant in someone else's urn. You rise again and keep walking. The sun is just now beginning to touch the tops of the palace domes, gilding them in that momentary glow that makes everything look eternal. And for a second, you do feel eternal. Then, across the garden, you spot a familiar robe, a blue one with silver stitching. It's the Valide Sultan. She is walking slowly, flanked by 2 attendants, her veil soft but unmistakable. You pause. The Valide rules this world not just because she is the Sultan's mother, but because she understands that motherhood, when wielded properly, is a weapon sharper than any dagger. She sees you, nods, continues. That nod, it might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. Historians still argue whether the Valide Sultan wielded true imperial authority or was simply a figurehead of reverence. Some say she pulled strings behind every policy. Others claim she only advised. But one thing's clear, no one moved without her knowing. And when she nodded, that meant the air around you had changed. You returned to your chambers, not in a rush, but with intention. You tell the head maid, "I'll need the white silk this evening." You don't say why. She bows. She doesn't ask. She never does. Later, as you sip coffee and nibble a cube of sugar-dusted locum, you hear a pigeon coo from the lattice. You glance up. It's not a pigeon. It's a small folded paper, tied in grey ribbon, dropped through the lattice work with the stealth of practiced fingers. You unfold it. "No name." "Of course." She nodded. "And you were standing in shadow. Your next move matters more than your last." You smile. You know exactly who sent it. She always was a poet with punctuation. You burn the note. You place the ashes in the silver tray by your teacup. You stir them gently before finishing your drink, and you whisper to no one. Good. Let them wonder. Because power isn't in making noise. It's in walking past a rose that everyone stares at and noticing the thorn behind it instead. It's mid-afternoon now. The time when light becomes lazy and everything in the palace seems to sigh at once. You've changed again into a gown of pale lilac with sleeves that whisper against your skin. Not because anyone demanded it, but because being unremarkable would be a crime today. You're expected at a private gathering in the music chamber, a quiet affair, technically informal, but every woman attending knows it's anything but. The guest list is carefully curated. Wives, sisters, nieces of viziers, governors, and generals. Some carry fans, others carry grudges. You arrive precisely 7 minutes late. Deliberate. It gives the impression you had to be convinced to come, which in turn makes you instantly important. The woman seated closest to the harp gestures for you to sit beside her. You smile faintly and choose the cushion beside a different one. The music begins. A kanun, its strings shimmering like water, fills the room with delicate dissonance. Eyes close, heads tilt. But you're watching, because in this empire, music is always layered. A song can be a story or a strategy. Mainstream historical fact, Ottoman noblewomen were often trained in musical arts, both to perform and to understand. Music in the palace wasn't just entertainment, it was identity. Specific instruments signified class, upbringing, or education. To request a certain tune could be a coded message, especially if performed publicly. A young girl performs next. She's no older than 12, but her fingers are quick and her posture rigid. She's nervous. You watch her mother, seated stiffly at the edge of the circle, silently pleading with the universe for the girl to get it right. She does, barely. The applause is polite. You offer a single nod. The girl sees it and exhales visibly. You've given her mother a minor victory. That will return to you, one way or another. Then comes the hour's real performance, not musical, but conversational. The moment the harp is carried out, the women lean in. Tea is served again. Trays of dates and roasted almonds passed around like bribes wrapped in silver. You're asked, casually, "Did you hear the ambassador's wife found the kitchen too spicy?" You respond, just as casually. Maybe her words were underseasoned. Laughter, light and controlled. You've struck just hard enough to leave a mark without bruising the air. Quirky tidbit. In elite Ottoman circles, women were masters of passive-aggressive compliments. How bold of her to wear that color might mean she looked terrible. I didn't expect her to know that song could mean someone assumed she couldn't read music. It was a game of smiles, sharp enough to slice. Someone brings out a lute, and you're asked to sing. Of course you are. You decline, of course, but then you don't. You rise, step forward slowly, and take the lute. You pluck a few notes, then sing a soft lullaby, nothing flashy. Just a mother's tune from your childhood, layered with subtle melancholy. It's not about showcasing your voice. It's about reminding everyone that you have depth they've never heard. The room goes quiet as you finish. You hand back the instrument, bow your head, and return to your seat. The woman beside you, one of your sharper rivals, leans over. "That was lovely. I didn't know you remembered such old songs." You sip your tea. "I remember everything." She does not smile. That's how you know it landed. Historians still argue whether these music gatherings were genuine cultural moments or strategic performances wrapped in song. You don't argue. You simply observe every invitation is a test. Every note, every glance, every seating choice matters. After a final round of sweetened almonds and honeyed apricots, the gathering ends. Polite farewells are exchanged like fencing touches. Women drift out in pairs, some whispering, some conspicuously silent. You wait until nearly everyone has gone before you rise. A younger girl stops you at the door. She offers you a tiny sachet of lavender. "For your pillow," she says. You pause. The sachet is stitched with a single blue thread barely noticeable. Blue, the color of caution. You nod, accept it, and tuck it into your sleeve. Later, in your chambers, you turn it over in your hands. Who sent it? A warning, a courtesy, a reminder you won't know until tomorrow. Maybe longer. But now, you do know someone is watching out for you or watching you. You place the sachet beneath your mirror, beside the scrolls and ink, where everything important lives. Then you sit, unwrap a single candied almond, and bite into it slowly. There's no note inside, no symbol, just sugar and crunch. For once, something is exactly what it seems, but only for now. The palace slows as the sun lowers behind the hills, spilling long golden fingers across the domes and walls. This is when even the shadows begin to lean tired from holding so much all day. You've changed again. Tonight, you wear ivory silk with soft, faded embroidery that barely catches the candlelight. You don't need to sparkle. You just need to glow as if you carry secrets even your own silhouette hasn't overheard. You move through the corridor toward the Western Library. No one invited you, not officially, but you were expected. You always are. Inside, the room is hushed. Lanterns cast halos on the calligraphy-laced walls, and the scent of parchment mixes with ink and dried figs. 4 other women are already there, one reading, one writing, one pretending to be both, and the 4th watching all 3 with the same mild smile she uses to interrogate servants. They look up as you enter. One nods. 2 smile. One doesn't move. That one dangerous. Always has been. You seat yourself on a cushion near the low writing desk and unroll a scroll without glancing at it. The movement is a signal I'm listening. Not asking. Mainstream historical fact. Some noblewomen in the Ottoman court formed private intellectual salons, spaces where poetry, philosophy, court news, and personal alliances could flourish in a more controlled, female-led environment. These gatherings were unofficial yet deeply influential, especially in an empire where the unofficial often mattered most, the quiet stretches. Someone begins to recite verse from Hafiz, delicate and sharp like honey on broken glass. Someone else counters with a line from a Sufi mystic, followed by a modern couplet. Barely veiled, she poured his tea with a trembling hand, but his cup stayed dry, his tongue too planned. A few smiles flicker. You say nothing. You offer nothing. That's what makes them lean closer. Then someone turns to you. What do you think about silence in poetry? You meet her gaze, slowly. Silence is the part they never forget. The one who hadn't spoken at all still hasn't finally raises an eyebrow. Quirky tidbit. In Ottoman Harem salons, women sometimes dueled not with verse, but with omissions. The poem not shared, the line almost finished. The name left unspoken, these absences screamed the loudest. Some scrolls were even deliberately torn, or burned halfway, as messages left dangling. Someone stands to leave. You rise, too. But before exiting, you drop a folded paper onto the low table. You don't look back. They will read it when you're gone. That's the point. Back in your chamber. You're quiet, not tired, just still. Historians still argue whether these women truly influenced the Sultan's court or simply orbited it. But you know, influence isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a silence people quote for years. You sit on the edge of your bed. There, on your cushion, lies another sachet, this one stitched with green thread. You blink once. That was not there this morning. You don't react. You lift it, open it. Dried rose petals, a sliver of cinnamon, and a single dried fig seed. You smile, faintly. Green means next move is yours. You place it beside the other sachet, the blue one from the music chamber. Warnings, blessings, offers. They blur together. Eventually, it's not the message that matters, it's how you answer. You exhale, then walk to your writing desk, light a single candle, and begin drafting a short letter. You don't rush. Each word matters. Let the thread show. Let the seams stretch. They've forgotten the hands that made the cloth. Remind them, the letter will never be sent, but its presence, its ink, its mere existence will echo. You'll let the right person find it when the time comes. Now, as night folds completely over the palace and the city beyond sleeps in its cradle of stone and shadow, you finally lie down. You stare at the ceiling a long while, listening to the whisper of the fan you had brought in its soft hum almost like wind through reeds. You pull the blanket higher, but not for warmth, for weight. You think of Halim, the ambassador's wife, the sachets, the song, the silence. And you think of the girl who once stood in this room, trying to decipher which fork went with which plate. She's long gone. You are someone else now. And though no one crowned you, though no decree bears your name, you've become exactly what the Empire didn't plan for. A woman who waits for no one. A woman who decides. The candle flickers lower, casting shadows that sway gently across the ceiling like dancers growing drowsy. Outside, the wind curls around the eaves of the palace, humming to itself. The marble has cooled. The silks are still. The Empire, just for now, sleeps. You lie still beneath soft linen, eyes half closed, body loose from the weight of the day. The air tastes faintly of cardamom and rosewater, as if the walls themselves are breathing with you. You listen to the silence not empty, but filled with everything unspoken, everything postponed until tomorrow. Your breath slows. The world fades into soft colors and slower thoughts. The palace becomes distant, almost dreamlike. The scrolls, the sachets, The teacups and poems, they drift away, carried off like petals on the breeze. What remains is only you and peace. Whatever tomorrow brings, you'll meet it, not with fear, not with fury, but with the quiet power of someone who has mastered the game of stillness. The fan hums on. The moon rises higher, and everything the empire, the world, even your heartbeat slows into softness. So close your eyes now. Let the past slide away. Let your muscles loosen. Let the night hold you like silk. You are safe. You are seen. You are sovereign.